What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my post-free agency top 15 wide receiver rankings. Went through the running backs yesterday. Today, we are locking in on the wideouts. Some of these guys have definitely had their situations change since I did my rankings video right after the season. Other guys still could have some changes, whether that's like a later in free agency quarterback signing. Obviously, the draft could shake things up for all these guys, but this is where we're at this point. Would love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think should be higher? Who do you think should be lower? But diving right in here to my wide receiver one, it's Jamar Chase. He's my only tier one wide receiver, and I'd have a tough time picking any other wide receiver ahead of him at this point. He's coming off a season where he averaged 23.7 points per game, was number one in targets, red zone targets, receptions, receiving yards, yak, and touchdowns. Just an all-around amazing season. He re-upped with the Bengals. He's going to have Joe Burrow at quarterback. They've put a ton of money towards the offense. Expect the defense to struggle once again. High-scoring games on a great offense. He's obviously a great talent at the wide receiver position. Jamar Chase, my wide receiver one, and my only guy in tier one. Then moving into tier two, actually bumped this guy up one spot from the video I did right after the season. I have CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver two. Coming off kind of a disappointing season, was the wide receiver 8 at 17.6 points per game, but we know he has that elite ceiling in there. He's had a season where he's put up 23.7 points per game. Expect Dak to be healthy in week one. If CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott are out there together, he is going to be in contention to be the top fantasy wide receiver. Then the guy that I originally had as my wide receiver two, it's Puka Nacua. I thought before the Davante Adams signing, actually maybe after also, but I thought he was going to be a really nice value in drafts. He was coming off a season where in 9 healthy games, he averaged 21.8 points per game. If you take out, I think it was week 1 where he left with injury, and then the game where he got ejected like right before half, you remove those 2 games. When he's playing the full, 60 minutes, he's averaging nearly 22 points per game, and that was while only scoring 3 touchdowns. So if he was hitting in the touchdown department, like he had legit upside of 23, 24, maybe even 25 points per game if he really hit in that area. He was number 1 in yards per route run. I do think the Davante Adams signing, moving on from Cooper Kupp, I'd say it's a net negative for Puka, just because I think Davante Adams is an upgrade over what they had with Cooper Kupp, but I still fully expect Puka to be the wide receiver one. He's going to be a target hog. And, maybe Davante Adams kind of frees some things up for him. Maybe he can hit in the touchdown department more than he has in his first couple of seasons. But I'm still very, very in on Puka here, which is why I have him in my top 3. And then my last tier 2 wide receiver, maybe a couple spots lower than where some people would have him. This is where I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson. This is obviously not a talent thing. If we were just doing this, who are the best receivers in the NFL, he would have a strong case to be number 1. He's coming off a solid season, averaged 18.7 points per game. I'm just looking at this quarterback situation, and it was a question mark heading into last year with Sam Darnold, right? Darnold played really well, threw for over 4,300 yards, 35 passing touchdowns. I just think you look at the numbers that Darnold put up, and then you look at J.J. McCarthy, and if he came in and threw for 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns, I think that's probably a way above the mean kind of projection for him. So I just don't know if this is like a quarterback upgrade right out of the gate. I just don't think it's the same thing with like Matthew Stafford with Puka, Dak with CeeDee Lamb, obviously Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase. I just don't think he has that level of quarterback play. Still an amazing player, still going to be really strong for fantasy, but why have him here as my wide receiver 4? Now moving into tier 3, really kind of fun tier here. Got some proven guys, some guys heading into year 2. My wide receiver 5 is going to be Nico Collins. Back-to-back really strong seasons. In 2023, he averaged 17.4 points per game. 2024, bumped that up to 17.6. And that was 17.6 in like a down year for Stroud where his numbers fell off from his rookie season. The offensive line was rough. Collins had an amazing start to the season, got hurt. When he got back, the numbers weren't quite the same, but obviously still a strong play. I do think that if we get a bounce back here from CJ Stroud, Nico Collins definitely has like that 20-plus point per game upside. I firmly believe that's in there. Still a believer in CJ Stroud. I like Nico Collins to lead off tier 3. Then I'm going to go with one of those year 2 guys in Brian Thomas Jr. He was the wide receiver 12 in points per game as a rookie and was just an absolute monster down the stretch. In his last 6 games, he averaged 22.9 points per game, and that was with Mac Jones at quarterback. I love what the Jaguars have done this offseason, bringing in Liam Cohen. They've moved on from Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. BTJ is going to get fed in this offense. Now, I do think they're maybe going to add one of the solid wide receivers in the draft. If they went, round one wide receiver, I wouldn't be shocked. So they might bring in competition, but BTJ is going to be the guy they run this offense through. I think Trevor Lawrence, whether you're super high on him or you're kind of out on him, I still think he's a really strong upgrade over Mac Jones. I think BTJ is going to be lined up to have a really, really nice year too. Then my wide receiver 7, definitely a more established option. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown coming off a really nice season, 18.6 PPR points per game, was top 5 in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. In his last 3 seasons, he's averaging 16.7, 20.7, and 18.6 points per game. This offense did lose Ben Johnson, but Amon-Ra is established. He's always going to be in the mix as like a mid to high end wide receiver 1 play. And then I believe my last guy here in tier 3, I have the other year 2 wide receiver in Malik Neighbors. As a rookie, he was the wide receiver 7 in points per game at 18.2 points per game. That is insane production. It's even crazier when you consider the situation he was in. It's not like he landed with some sort of top tier quarterback on a top tier offense. He had a quarterback carousel on a bad team, and he was still delivering that fantasy production. He was number 1 in targets per game by over a full target. He led the NFL in target share. The issue here for Neighbors is just that the quarterback situation is still up in the air. Rodgers has been thrown out there. Are they going to go get someone in the draft? I feel like worst case scenario, it's maybe like a Russell Wilson, but regardless of who's playing quarterback, they're going to pepper him with targets. Dable's going to get this man the ball, and he has the talent to produce on those opportunities. So Malik Neighbors here is going to close out tier 3 for me. Moving into tier 4, we're going to start off with Drake London here, someone who had a really nice year 3 breakout, went from 10.5 to 10.9, all the way up to 16.5 points per game. We have a 3-game sample size of him playing with Michael Penix. He delivered, 3 solid performances, 5 for 59, 7 for 106, and then 10 for 187 and 2 touchdowns. I think he's in an interesting spot here where I think he has the talent to be a nice wide receiver 1. The situation is still somewhat of a question mark. Like, is Michael Penix going to be that guy to truly elevate him? But we saw a strong season, with Kirk not playing well the first few games of Penix, in his NFL career. I think he's a nice back-end wide receiver 1 play with the opportunity to take another leap, if Penix also takes a jump. After Drake London, going to go with T. Higgins here, coming off by far his best fantasy season, 18.5 points per game, which is a great number. It's even crazier when you're putting up that type of production as the wide receiver 2 in your own offense. Just like Jamar Chase, he got re-upped, so he's going to be sticking around here with Joe Burrow. One of the concerns here for T. Higgins, or I don't know if it's a concern, just something that's there, is he doesn't have like the same upside as a guy like Drake London, where wide receiver 1, quarterback takes a leap. Drake London could truly break into like that high-end wide receiver 1 territory. Barring an injury to Jamar Chase, it's really tough to see T. Higgins putting up those kind of numbers just because he is the number 2. But I think he's a really nice back-end wide receiver 1 fantasy option and has proven he does have that ceiling of getting up to like that mid-tier wide receiver 1 area, even with Jamar Chase in the lineup. Another guy who maybe has like that kind of ceiling concern is A.J. Brown. Now, he is his team's wide receiver 1. It's just not going to be a super high volume passing attack. It's just not a super optimal situation for, an elite fantasy wide receiver. Like, I think if A.J. Brown was in, a bunch of different situations, he could be like that mid to high end wide receiver 1. I think he does have that talent. Just here with the Eagles, we have a 3-season sample size. We kind of know what we're getting here, where he probably doesn't have that nuclear upside, which is why it might be a little bit lower on him, than some other people out there. Now, moving into my 5th and final tier, we're going to start off with back-to-back guys going into year 2. The first one is going to be Ladd McConkey. Closed the season really hot. Last 7 games, averaged 18.7 points per game, went for at least 80 yards in 6 out of 7 of those. I do think we could see the Chargers really have an uptick in their passing volume, even with Justin Herbert at quarterback, in my opinion, like a top 5 QB in the league. They still had the 5th fewest pass attempts per game. I also think it's possible they add competition in the draft. If they added like a round 1, round 2 pass catcher, that would not shock me. But I still think Ladd's proven he's a very talented player with a potential uptick in volume. I really like him heading into year 2. And then the other guy heading into year 2, we have Jackson Smith-Njigba. And he's really just had like this entire offense flipped on its head. The offensive coordinator has been changed. They went from Ryan Grubb to Clint Kubiak. Quarterback has been changed, went from Geno to Sam Darnold. His wide receiver mates have changed. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett out, Cooper Kupp in. But JSN had a really nice second half breakout. Last 9 games, averaged 18.2 points per game. My concern here for JSN is it's good that he flashed the talent. It's good that he's productive. It kind of seems suboptimal here to have 2 guys in JSN and Cooper Kupp who kind of thrive in the slot. And we saw JSN his rookie year. He was kind of misused by his year 1 offensive coordinator, which I believe was Shane Waldron. And so the fact that you have these 2 wide receivers where their skill sets don't really seem to go together super well, that's somewhat concerning. You'd like to hope they're going to use him properly, and he should be their top dog. I think the talent's there. It's just a minor concern, but I still have JSN here in the tier 5 area. And then we're going to have back-to-back veterans to close us out. My wide receiver 14 is going to be Mike Evans. He has just been a super safe, super stable option in the wide receiver spot, coming off a wide receiver 10 finish in points per game, 17.2 points per game in his last 5 seasons. On a point per game basis, he has been the wide receiver 16, the wide receiver 10, the wide receiver 13, the wide receiver 10, and then the wide receiver 10. Chris Godwin coming off, I believe it was a torn ACL, so he's probably not going to be, back to 100% himself first year back. Mike Evans does turn 32 this offseason, which you're starting to get up there in age a little bit, which maybe some people are like, oh, he's had all these top 10 finishes or, wide receiver 10 finishes. He should be ranked higher. I feel like that age risk is kind of baked in here where if he finishes a few spots ahead of this, I'm not going to be kicking myself for ranking him at wide receiver 14, but you just have to factor in that potential drop off in production. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's just a risk that some of these other younger guys like Alad McConkey or JSN don't have. And then my last guy here said it was a veteran. It's going to be Davante Adams. I think, some people are going to view this Davante Adams to the Rams as a similar situation to Julio to the Titans, or this older veteran, used to be great wide receiver, going to a new situation. I still think Davante Adams has a lot of juice here, coming off a season where he was the wide receiver 9 in points per game, averaged 17.2. He's 32 years old, but I still think he has a lot of juice here. He's stepping into a great situation. Matthew Stafford at quarterback, Sean McVay at head coach. He's playing with another great wide receiver in Puka Nacua. I think Davante Adams can easily turn in a high-end wide receiver 2 season, or maybe even break into the top 12, assuming he's the same guy that we've seen over the last few years. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 15. Would love to hear your thoughts. Who are you higher on? Who are you lower on? Who should have made the list that didn't? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.